The diplomatic vessel hung motionless in the cold darkness of space. It had traveled for 6 months across the vast emptiness between stars, crossing distances that would take a human lifetime to walk. Now it sat perfectly still, as if afraid to move even 1 meter closer to its destination. Ambassador Al stood alone on the observation deck, his long, thin fingers pressed against the transparent wall that separated him from the vacuum outside. His skin shifted color slowly, moving from deep purple to shimmering green and back again. This was a sign of deep thought among his people, and right now his thoughts were very deep indeed. Before him, hanging in the blackness like a tiny yellow jewel, was the star that humans called Sol. Around that star orbited 8 planets, and on the third of those planets lived the most terrifying species the galaxy had ever known. Humans. Al had studied them his entire life. He had read every report, watched every recording, and memorized every detail in the massive file that the Galactic Concord kept on them. He knew more about humans than almost any other being in the cosmos, and that knowledge was exactly why his hands were trembling. Behind him, the door slid open with a soft hiss. Captain entered, his heavy boots clicking against the metal floor. He was a military officer, not a diplomat, and he had made his feelings about this mission very clear from the beginning. Ambassador, we have reached the boundary line. I will not take this vessel any closer. Al did not turn around. He continued staring at that distant yellow star. I understand, Captain. This is close enough. With respect, Ambassador, this is already too close. No vessel has ever come within 50 light-years of Earth. We are breaking 400 years of tradition by being here. Tradition born from fear, Al said quietly. Tradition born from wisdom, the captain replied. The humans are not like other species. You know this better than anyone. Al finally turned to face him. His eyes were large and dark, filled with an emotion that the captain could not quite identify. I know what the files say, Captain. I know what every species in the galaxy believes about them, but I also know that we cannot hide from them forever. They are spreading. They are growing. And sooner or later we will have to face them. The captain said nothing. There was nothing to say. They both knew that Al was right. Across the vast distance of space, on a station orbiting Earth's moon, Commander Lisa Grant was just beginning her shift. She walked through the narrow corridors of the Earth Defense Coalition headquarters, a cup of coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other. The station was quiet at this hour, most of the staff still asleep in their quarters. Lisa was 43 years old, with short brown hair that was starting to show streaks of gray. She had spent 20 years in the coalition, working her way up from a junior communications officer to the commander of the entire First Contact Division. It was an important job, but lately it had felt pointless. In 60 years of interstellar travel, humanity had encountered 17 intelligent species. Not one of them had ever agreed to visit Earth. Not one of them had ever invited humans to visit their home worlds. They would talk, trade information, exchange cultural databases, and then they would leave. They always left. Lisa had spent her entire career trying to understand why. She had studied alien languages, alien cultures, alien psychology. She had spent thousands of hours in communication with beings from across the galaxy, and she was no closer to an answer than she had been on her first day. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of running footsteps behind her. She turned to see Danny, her young lieutenant, sprinting down the corridor toward her. Commander, we have a contact. Lisa felt her heart jump. Where? Sector 7G, right at the boundary line. It's a vessel. Lisa started walking faster, and Danny fell into step beside her. They haven't sent a ship this close in decades. I know, ma'am, and there's something else. They're requesting direct communication. They want to talk to whoever is in charge of first contact protocols. Lisa stopped walking. She turned to look at Danny, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of joke. There was none. They want to talk to me. Yes, ma'am, specifically you. Lisa stood there for a long moment, her mind racing. In all her years of service, no alien vessel had ever requested direct communication with a specific human. They usually kept their messages as impersonal as possible, as if they were afraid that getting too close to any individual human might somehow contaminate them. Get the communication center ready, she said finally. I'll be there in 5 minutes. She continued down the corridor, but now her pace was different. Faster, more urgent. Something was happening, something that had never happened before. She could feel it in her bones. When she reached the communication center, the rest of her team was already there. Price was at the main console, her fingers dancing across the controls. She was the youngest member of the team, barely 25, but she was the best communications specialist Lisa had ever worked with. I've established a connection, said without looking up. They're waiting for you, Commander. Lisa took a deep breath and sat down in the central chair. The large screen in front of her flickered to life, and suddenly she was looking at a face she had only ever seen in photographs. Ambassador Al of the Diplomatic Corps. His skin was shifting through colors she had no names for, and his large dark eyes seemed to look right through her. When he spoke, his voice was translated by the computer into flat, neutral English, but Lisa could hear something underneath those words, something that sounded almost like fear. Commander Grant, thank you for speaking with me. I have come a very long way, and I have something important to tell you. Lisa leaned forward slightly. I'm listening, Ambassador. For 60 of your years, the galaxy has kept its distance from your species. You have wondered why. You have asked, and we have never answered. Today, I am going to answer. Lisa's hands gripped the arms of her chair. Behind her, she could hear Danny and holding their breath. The galaxy knows what humanity is, Al continued. We have known since before you left your planet. We have watched you. We have studied you. And we have made a decision that every species in the cosmos has agreed upon. What decision? Lisa asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Al's colors shifted to a deep, somber blue. We stay away from humans because we are afraid of you, not afraid of what you might do to us, afraid of what you have already done to yourselves, and survived. The screen flickered, and for a moment Lisa thought the connection had been lost. But then Al spoke again, and his words changed everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the universe. I have come to explain why, and perhaps, if you are willing to listen, to begin something new. Al remembered the first time he had read the file on humanity. He was young then, barely more than a student at the Diplomatic Academy. His instructor was an ancient being named Al, who had served the Diplomatic Corps for more than 300 years and had seen things that would drive most beings mad. Al had gathered all the students in a small room with no windows. He had locked the door behind them, and then he had told them that what they were about to read would change them forever. Every species that joins the galactic community receives this file, Al had said. It is the first thing we share with them. It is the most important thing we share with them. Because if they do not read this file, if they do not understand what it contains, they will make a mistake that could cost them everything. He had handed each student a data crystal. This is the file on Sol 3, the humans. Read it, all of it, and when you are finished, we will talk. Al had read it. He had read every word, every report, every analysis. It had taken him 6 hours. When he finished, he sat in silence for 2 more hours, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but think about what he had learned. The file began with the basics. Sol 3 was a small rocky planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. It had developed life approximately 4 billion years ago, and intelligent life had emerged roughly 200,000 years ago. This intelligent life called itself human. So far, nothing unusual. The galaxy was full of intelligent species. The alone had more than 400 of them. Then came the history. The humans had built civilizations not once, not twice, but dozens of times. They had created great cities, developed complex languages, produced art and music and literature. And then they had destroyed it all, over and over again, war after war after war. Al had not understood the concept at first. His species had disagreements, certainly. Sometimes those disagreements became heated, but the idea of organized violence on a massive scale, of millions of beings killing millions of other beings, was so foreign to him that he could not wrap his mind around it. But the humans had done it. They had done it constantly. Their entire history was written in blood. The file contained records of human conflicts going back thousands of years. Wars fought over land. Wars fought over resources. Wars fought over ideas. Wars fought over things so small and meaningless that no other species could even understand what they were fighting about. And the scale of the killing was beyond anything Al could imagine. One conflict, which the humans called World War II, had killed more than 70 million beings in just 6 years. 70 million. That was more than the entire population of some planets, and it was just one war among thousands. But that was not the worst of it. The worst of it was the weapons. The humans had invented ways to kill each other that were so efficient, so devastating, that they could end all life on their planet in a matter of hours. They called these weapons nuclear bombs. They had built thousands of them. They had pointed them at each other, and they had come within minutes of using them, not once but many times. Al had stared at that part of the file for a long time. He had read it over and over again, certain that he must be misunderstanding something. No species could be that self-destructive. No species could come that close to extinction by their own hand and not actually do it. But the humans had not done it. That was the part that terrified him the most. They had stood at the edge of the abyss. They had looked down into the darkness of their own extinction, and they had stepped back. They had chosen to survive. When Al had gathered the students again after their reading, the room was completely silent. No one spoke. No one even looked at each other. They were all lost in their own thoughts, trying to process what they had learned. "Now you understand," Al had said. "The humans are not like us. They are not like any species we have ever encountered. They are capable of destruction on a scale we cannot imagine, but they are also capable of something else, something that we cannot ignore." He had paused, letting his words sink in. They are survivors. No matter what happens to them, no matter what they do to themselves, they survive. They adapt. They grow stronger. And that is why we stay away from them. Not because we fear what they might do to us, because we fear what would happen if we ever gave them a reason to turn their survival instincts against us. Now, decades later, Al stood on his ship at the edge of human space, preparing to do something that no being had ever done before. He was going to tell the humans the truth. The communication with Commander Grant had gone well, better than he had expected. She had listened without interrupting, her face showing a mixture of emotions that his translator could not quite identify. When he had finished explaining why he had come, she had been silent for a long moment. Then she had done something that surprised him. She had invited him aboard her station. Al had almost refused. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to turn his ship around and flee back to the safety of space. But he had come too far to turn back now. He had started something, and he needed to see it through. "I will come," he had said. "But I must ask you to understand something, Commander. I am not just afraid for myself. I am afraid for my entire species. If this meeting goes wrong, if something happens to me, they will respond. And then the other species will respond. And then—" He had not finished the sentence. He had not needed to. Commander Grant had nodded slowly. "I understand, Ambassador. Nothing will happen to you. You have my word." Al had accepted her word, though he was not entirely sure what it meant. Human language was full of strange concepts that did not translate well. Word seemed to mean something more than just a spoken sound. It seemed to carry weight, obligation, honor. Another thing that set the humans apart from other species. They valued their promises. Now he was preparing to board a shuttle that would take him to the human station. His captain had tried one more time to convince him not to go. "Ambassador, please reconsider. No has ever set foot on a human vessel. We do not know what will happen." "That is exactly why I must go, Captain," Al had replied. "We have spent 400 years not knowing. It is time we learned." He stepped into the shuttle and sealed the door behind him. Through the small window, he could see the distant shape of the human station, a tiny dot of light against the vast darkness of space. He was about to become the first non-human to ever come face to face with the most dangerous species in the galaxy. And he had never been more terrified in his entire life. Captain Marsh had been commanding starships for 25 years. He had seen things that most humans could not even imagine. He had traveled to distant star systems, mapped unknown planets, and made contact with alien species so strange that they gave him nightmares for weeks afterward. But nothing had prepared him for today. He stood in the docking bay of his ship, the Starward, watching through the reinforced window as the small shuttle approached. Behind him, his crew stood in perfect formation, their uniforms pressed, their faces calm. They were professionals. They did not show fear, but could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew what was about to happen. For the first time in human history, an alien being was going to board a human vessel. For the first time, a non-human was going to stand in the same room as them, breathe the same air, look them in the eyes. Was 54 years old, with gray hair cut short, and a face that showed every one of his years in space. He had earned his reputation as one of the best captains in the fleet, a man who stayed calm under pressure and always brought his crew home safe. But right now, standing in that docking bay, he felt like a nervous young officer on his first mission. The shuttle docked with a soft thump, heard the hiss of the airlock cycling, and then the inner door began to open. Ambassador Al stepped through. He was taller than had expected, almost 2 meters, with long, thin limbs that moved in a way that seemed almost liquid. His skin was shifting through colors, deep blues and purples that swirled together like oil on water. His eyes were large and completely dark, with no visible pupils, and they seemed to take in everything at once. For a long moment, no one moved. Humans and aliens stood facing each other across the docking bay, separated by only a few meters of empty space, but also by millions of years of different evolution, different history, different everything. Then stepped forward and extended his hand. "Ambassador Al, welcome aboard the Starward. I'm Captain Marsh." Al looked at the extended hand, could see uncertainty in his posture, in the way his colors shifted to a lighter shade of blue. The ambassador did not know what to do. "It's a greeting," explained gently. "Among humans, we shake hands when we meet someone. You take my hand in yours and we move them up and down. It's a sign of trust." "Trust," Al repeated. His translator made the word sound flat, but there was something underneath it. Wonder, perhaps, or disbelief. Slowly, carefully, the ambassador reached out his own hand. His fingers were longer than with an extra joint, and his skin was cool and smooth to the touch. Wrapped his hand around the aliens and shook gently. "There," he said with a small smile. "Now we've been properly introduced." Al's colors shifted to something warmer, a soft purple that would later learn was the equivalent of relief. "Captain Marsh, thank you for allowing me aboard your vessel. I know this is unusual." "Unusual is one word for it," agreed. "Historic might be another. Come, let me show you around. I think we have a lot to talk about." They walked through the corridors of the Starward together, pointing out different sections of the ship, while his crew watched in silent amazement. Communications Officer Price fell into step behind them, her tablet ready to record everything for the official logs. Al asked questions about everything. He wanted to know how the engines worked, how the life support systems functioned, how the crew was organized. He seemed genuinely curious about every aspect of human technology and culture. But underneath all those questions could sense something else, a deeper question that Al was not quite ready to ask. They reached the observation deck, a large room with windows that looked out onto the stars. Had always loved this room. It reminded him of why he had become a space captain in the first place. The universe was so vast, so beautiful, so full of possibilities. "Ambassador," he said, "I've been doing this job for a long time. I've met dozens of aliens from different species, and they all have one thing in common. They're afraid of us. They keep their distance. They never stay long." He turned to face Al directly. "Why?" Al was silent for a moment. His colors shifted through several shades before settling on a deep, serious blue. "Captain Marsh, what do you know about your own species' history?" Frowned. "I know we've had our dark moments. Wars, conflicts, that sort of thing. But we've moved past most of that. We're explorers now, not conquerors." "That is what you tell yourselves," Al said. "But that is not what the galaxy sees when it looks at you." He moved to stand beside the window, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. "The Galactic Concord has been watching your species for a very long time. We watched you develop fire. We watched you build your first cities. We watched you discover how to split the atom. You've been watching us that long. Every spacefaring species watches the developing worlds in their region. It is standard practice. We want to know when a new species is about to join the galactic community, so we can prepare for first contact." "But you didn't contact us until we came to you," said slowly. "We achieved faster-than-light travel 60 years ago. We reached out to the galaxy, and the galaxy ran away." Al's colors flickered. "Yes, because by the time you achieved, we had already made our decision. We had already read your history, and we had already decided that the safest course of action was to stay as far away from you as possible." Stepped forward, her face pale. "What exactly did you read? What is it about our history that scared you so much?" Al turned to look at her. For a moment, his large dark eyes seemed almost sad. "Everything," he said quietly. "We read everything. Your wars, your weapons, your capacity for destruction. But more than that, we read about your capacity for survival. No matter what happens to you, no matter how close you come to extinction, you survive. You adapt. You overcome." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Among the 412 species of the Galactic Concord, not a single one has ever destroyed itself. Not a single one has ever come close. We do not have wars like yours. We do not have weapons like yours. We do not have the same drive that you have." "You're saying we're more violent than every other species in the galaxy?" asked. "No, Captain. I'm saying you're more alive, more passionate, more determined. And that makes you the most dangerous species any of us have ever encountered. Not because you might attack us, but because if we ever gave you a reason to, there is nothing in the universe that could stop you." The observation deck fell silent. Outside the windows, the stars burned cold and eternal, indifferent to the conversation taking place beneath them. Stood very still, his mind racing. All these years he had wondered why the galaxy kept its distance. Now he knew, and he was not sure how to feel about it. "So what happens now?" he asked finally. "You came all this way to tell us that everyone is afraid of us. What's the point?" Al's colors shifted to something new, something he had not seen before. It was brighter, warmer, almost hopeful. "The point, Captain, is that I believe we have been wrong. Fear has kept us apart for too long. I have come to propose something different, something new." He reached into his robes and pulled out a small data crystal, the same one he had shown to Commander Grant. "I want to give you the truth, all of it, and then I want to see what you do with it." Commander Lisa Grant sat alone in her quarters, staring at the data crystal in her hand. It was small, no bigger than her thumb, made of some kind of clear material that seemed to glow faintly from within. Such a tiny thing to contain so much. She had been sitting here for 3 hours, ever since Ambassador Al had given her a copy of the file. He had warned her that it would be difficult to read. He had told her to take her time, to process what she learned before making any decisions. She had not listened. She had started reading immediately, unable to stop herself. And now she sat in the darkness, her tablet forgotten on the table beside her, trying to make sense of what she had learned. The file on humanity was enormous. It contained thousands of pages of reports, analysis, and observations spanning tens of thousands of years. The Galactic Concord had been watching humans since before they had discovered fire. They had recorded everything. Lisa had read about wars she had learned about in school, but the alien perspective made them seem different, more terrible, more senseless. She had read about the concentration camps of World War II, the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan, the millions of people killed in conflicts around the globe. She had read about humans torturing other humans, enslaving other humans, committing acts of cruelty that no other species in the galaxy could even imagine. But she had also read about other things, things that the aliens found equally impossible to understand. She had read about humans risking their lives to save strangers, not family members, not friends, but complete strangers they had never met and would never meet again. She had read about soldiers throwing themselves on grenades to protect their comrades. She had read about doctors working in war zones, treating wounded enemies as well as allies. She had read about ordinary people standing up against injustice, even when it cost them everything. The aliens did not understand this. They had written long reports trying to explain it, trying to fit it into their understanding of how intelligent species behaved. They had failed. Humans, the reports concluded, were capable of both the greatest evil and the greatest good. They could destroy everything they touched, or they could lift it up to heights no other species had ever reached. There was no middle ground with humans. They were extreme in everything they did. And that was what terrified the galaxy. A knock on her door made Lisa jump. She looked up to see Danny standing in the doorway, his face concerned. "Commander, are you okay? You've been in here for hours." Lisa set down the tablet and rubbed her eyes. "I'm fine, Danny, just thinking. About the file. About everything." Danny stepped into the room and sat down across from her. He was young, only 32, and he had grown up in a world where aliens were real but distant. He had never questioned why the galaxy avoided humanity. He had simply accepted it as the way things were. "I read some of it too," he said quietly. "The parts about the wars, it's hard to read." "Did you read the other parts? The parts about the good things humans have done?" Danny nodded slowly. "That's almost harder in a way, because it shows that we have a choice. We can be monsters or we can be heroes, and looking at our history, we've been both." Lisa leaned back in her chair. "Al said something to me earlier. He said the galaxy isn't afraid of what we might do to them. They're afraid of what we've already done to ourselves, and survived." "What does that mean?" "It means they see us as survivors. We've faced extinction over and over again, sometimes from natural disasters, sometimes from our own stupidity, and we've always pulled through. No other species has ever done that. No other species has ever had to." She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the curve of the moon, and beyond it, the blue glow of Earth. "Danny, do you know why I became a first contact specialist?" "No, ma'am." "Because I believed that someday we would find our place in the galaxy. I believed that if we just kept reaching out, kept being friendly and peaceful, eventually the other species would accept us. I spent 20 years believing that." She turned to face him. "And now I find out that they've been watching us the whole time. They know exactly who we are, and they've decided to stay away because of it. So what do we do? Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then she picked up the data crystal and held it up to the light. We tell the truth, all of it. We release this file to the public, let everyone read what the galaxy thinks of us, and then we let humanity decide what to do about it. The decision to release the Sol 3 file was not made lightly. Lisa spent hours in communication with Earth's government, explaining what she had learned and why she believed the truth needed to come out. There were arguments, debates, and more than a few shouting matches. In the end, they agreed. The file was released to every news outlet on Earth simultaneously. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some people were angry. They felt betrayed, watched without their knowledge or consent. They demanded to know why the aliens had been spying on them for so long and why they had kept their distance. Others were ashamed. They read about the wars, the atrocities, the near-extinction events, and they felt the weight of human history pressing down on them. They understood why the galaxy was afraid. But many people felt something else entirely: pride. They read about humans surviving ice ages, plagues, and wars. They read about humans rebuilding after every disaster, learning from their mistakes, reaching for the stars despite everything that should have stopped them. They read about the heroes alongside the villains, the compassion alongside the cruelty. And they realized something that the aliens had never quite understood. Humanity was not defined by its worst moments. It was defined by its ability to rise above them. Captain Marsh read the public reactions from his ready room aboard the Starward. He had been following the news obsessively since the file's release, trying to gauge how humanity was handling the truth. Price knocked on his door. "Captain, the ambassador is asking to speak with you." Set down his tablet and straightened his uniform. "Send him in." Al entered the room slowly, his colors shifting through shades of blue and purple. He had been aboard the Starward for 3 days now, watching and waiting to see how humanity would react to the revelation. "Captain Marsh, I have been monitoring your species' response to the file." "And what do you think?" Al was silent for a moment. "I think I may have underestimated you, again." Raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "I expected anger, I expected denial. I expected your species to reject the truth, to claim that we had lied or exaggerated." He paused. "Instead, your people are accepting responsibility for their history. They are acknowledging both the darkness and the light. They are processing it." "We're good at that," said with a small smile. "Processing difficult truths, it's how we've survived this long." Al's colors shifted to something warmer. "Yes, I am beginning to understand that." He moved to the window, looking out at the stars. "Captain, I have a question, one that I have been wanting to ask since I first arrived." "Go ahead." "In the file, there are records of humans who committed terrible acts, war criminals, dictators, murderers. There are also records of humans who did extraordinary good, heroes, healers, peacemakers." He turned to face. "How do you reconcile these two extremes? How do you live with the knowledge that your species is capable of both?" Considered the question carefully before answering. "We don't reconcile them, Ambassador. We accept them. Every human being has the capacity for good and evil. What matters is the choice we make." He stood and joined Al at the window. "We've made a lot of bad choices throughout our history. We've done terrible things to each other and to our planet, but we've also made good choices. We've chosen love over hate, peace over war, hope over despair. Not always, not even most of the time, but often enough to matter. And that is enough. It has to be. It's all we have." Al was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. "I think perhaps the galaxy has been wrong about you. We saw only the darkness. We failed to see the light." Put a hand on the alien's shoulder. It was a human gesture, one that Al did not fully understand, but the meaning was clear enough. "Maybe it's time to look again." 6 months had passed since the release of the Sol 3 file. 6 months since humanity had learned the truth about its reputation in the galaxy. 6 months since everything had changed. Lisa Grant stood on the observation deck of the new Galactic Embassy Station, watching as another alien vessel approached Earth. This one was a species that had refused all contact with humans for over 40 years. Now they were coming to open formal diplomatic relations. They were the seventh species to do so since the revelation. The station itself was a marvel of combined engineering, built in orbit around Earth using both human and alien technology. It had been Al's idea, a neutral ground where species could meet without having to enter each other's territory. A place where trust could be built slowly, carefully, one conversation at a time. Lisa was no longer just a commander. She had been promoted to lead the new Department of Galactic Relations, responsible for managing humanity's growing connections with the rest of the cosmos. It was a job she had never imagined having, but one she had been born to do. Quite a view, isn't it? She turned to see Captain Marsh walking toward her. He had aged in the past 6 months, a few more lines around his eyes, a little more gray in his hair. But there was something different about him too, a lightness that had not been there before. "They should be docking in about an hour," Lisa said. "This will be their first official visit to a human facility." "I know, I still can't quite believe it's happening," joined her at the window. "When I first met Al, I thought he was the exception. One brave alien willing to take a chance on us. I never imagined it would lead to this." Neither did I, neither did anyone. Below them, Earth turned slowly in the darkness, a blue and green jewel wrapped in swirls of white cloud. Lisa had seen this view hundreds of times, but it never stopped taking her breath away. This was home. This was what they were fighting to protect and connect to the larger universe. "Have you heard from Al lately?" asked. Lisa nodded. "He sent a message yesterday. The High Council has formally approved his proposal. They're going to open their core systems to human visitors. After 400 years of keeping us out." "After 400 years," Lisa smiled. "He says it's going to take time for his people to get used to the idea. Centuries of fear don't disappear overnight, but they're willing to try. Because of him. Because of him, and because of us. Because we didn't react the way they expected us to." Was quiet for a moment. "Do you think they expected us to be angry when we found out they'd been watching us, keeping us at a distance? I think they expected us to prove them right, to respond with aggression, hostility, all the things our history said we were capable of. Instead, we responded with understanding. We looked at our own history, saw the truth in what they had written, and we accepted it. Is that why they're starting to trust us? Because we didn't attack?" Lisa shook her head. "No, they're starting to trust us because we showed them something they had never seen before: accountability, self-awareness, the ability to look at our worst moments and say, yes, we did that and we're going to do better." She turned to face him. "That's what they never understood about humans. They saw our capacity for destruction and assumed that was all we were. They missed our capacity for growth, for change, for becoming something more than we used to be." The door behind them slid open, and Danny stepped through. He was wearing a new uniform, dark blue with silver trim, the official dress of the Galactic Relations Department. "Commander, Captain, the vessel is requesting permission to begin docking procedures." Lisa straightened her own uniform and took a deep breath. "Permission granted. Let's go welcome our guests." They walked together through the corridors of the embassy station, past humans and aliens working side by side. It was still a strange sight, one that Lisa was not sure she would ever get completely used to. For 60 years, humanity had been alone among the stars. Now, finally, they had company. The docking bay was crowded with dignitaries and officials from both Earth and the Galactic Concord. Price was there, now serving as the station's chief communications officer. She caught Lisa's eye and smiled. The airlock cycled, and the door opened. The ambassador was smaller than Lisa had expected, barely reaching her shoulder. Her body was covered in iridescent scales that caught the light and threw off tiny rainbows. Her eyes were large and golden, with horizontal pupils that gave her an expression of permanent surprise. "Ambassador," Lisa said, extending her hand, "welcome to Earth space." The alien looked at the offered hand, then back at Lisa. "Ah yes, the handshaking ritual. Ambassador Al warned me about this." She reached out with her own hand, which had 4 fingers instead of 5, and grasped Lisa's firmly. "Commander Grant, I have traveled a very long way to be here. For 30 of your years, my species has debated whether to open relations with humanity. We have read your file, we have studied your history, and we have disagreed about what to do." "What changed your minds?" His golden eyes seemed to soften. "We watched what happened after the file was released. We watched your species react to the truth about yourselves, and we saw something we did not expect." "What did you see?" "Humility. Your people did not deny their history. They did not make excuses. They looked at the darkest parts of themselves and they accepted responsibility." She paused. "In all our centuries of observing the galaxy, we have never seen a species do that. It is remarkable." Lisa felt something warm spread through her chest. Pride, perhaps, or maybe just relief. "Ambassador, we have a saying on Earth. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. We remember our past, every terrible thing we've done, every mistake we've made. We remember it because we're determined not to repeat it." "And do you succeed?" "Not always. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we fall back into old patterns, old hatreds, but we keep trying, we never stop trying." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and placed her scaled hand on Lisa's arm. "I think, Commander, that your species may be exactly what this galaxy needs, not despite your history but because of it. You have experienced the worst of what intelligent beings can do to each other, and you have survived. You have learned. You have grown." She looked around at the assembled crowd, at the humans and aliens standing together in this unprecedented moment. "Perhaps it is time for the rest of us to learn from you." Later that evening, Lisa stood alone on the observation deck, watching Earth turn below her. The delegation had settled into their quarters, and the official ceremonies were over. Tomorrow would bring meetings, negotiations, the slow work of building real relationships between species. But for now, she just wanted to stand here and think. Footsteps approached behind her. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. "Couldn't sleep either?" asked. "Too much to think about." He came to stand beside her, and for a while neither of them spoke. They just watched the Earth, the tiny blue dot that had given birth to a species capable of such terrible destruction and such incredible hope. "Do you think we deserve this?" asked finally. "After everything we've done, do we deserve to be accepted by the galaxy?" Lisa considered the question. It was one she had been asking herself for months. "I don't know if we deserve it," she said at last. "But I know we've earned it. Every time we chose peace over war, every time we reached out our hand instead of making a fist, every time we saw our own darkness and decided to be better. We earned this moment through millions of small choices made by billions of people over thousands of years." She turned to face him. "We're not perfect, we never will be, but we're trying, and maybe that's enough." Below them, Earth continued its eternal dance around the sun. Above them, the stars burned with ancient light, the same light that had shone down on humanity's first steps out of Africa, on their first cities, on their darkest wars and their triumphs. The galaxy had been afraid of humanity for a long time, and perhaps they had been right to be afraid. Humans were dangerous. They were unpredictable. They were capable of things that no other species could imagine. But they were also capable of change, of growth, of redemption. And now, at last, the galaxy was beginning to understand that. Lisa looked out at the stars, at all the worlds and all the species waiting out there in the darkness. For the first time in human history, they were not alone. For the first time, they had a chance to prove that humanity was more than its worst moments. She intended to make sure they took that chance. "Come on," she said too. "We've got a lot of work to do tomorrow." Together they walked away from the window, leaving the earth behind them. But they carried it with them, in their hearts. They always would.